name is Danielle Kerrigan, and I'm 58. For 32 years, I wore a badge like it was stitched into my skin. Patrol, detective, captain, then chief, long enough that people stopped seeing the uniform and started seeing the authority behind it. 3 years ago, I retired. Quietly. No scandals, no bitterness, no dramatic goodbye. I walked out of headquarters with a cardboard box of plaques and old case notes, and I promised myself the rest of my life would be simple. That's the lie I told myself. Because the hardest thing I've ever had to do didn't happen under fluorescent lights in an interrogation room. It happened on my couch in my own living room, with the evening news flickering across the walls like nothing in the world was wrong. I've seen people lie for attention, lie for money, lie to hurt someone. I've seen false reports that started wars between neighbors. I've watched families collapse because one person learned the power of a single phone call. But I never thought the person I'd been married to for 26 years would try it on me. My husband, Gavin Kerrigan, is 52. We have 2 daughters, both grown, both out of the house, both with lives busy enough that phone calls get scheduled like dentist appointments. We weren't some fairy tale couple, but we weren't a disaster either. We fought over dishes and holiday plans. We disagreed about money sometimes. We survived the exhausting years, kids, careers, aging parents. And then, over the last few months, Gavin started acting like a man who had already mentally packed his bags. It wasn't one big thing. That's what people don't understand. You don't wake up one morning and realize your marriage has shifted. It happens in inches. His phone started living face down. The moment I walked into a room, he'd flick his thumb across the screen like he was closing a tab to a secret life. He started going out with friends more, always vague, always last minute. He'd come home late, smelling like someone else's perfume or a different kind of soap, and when I asked, he'd shrug like my curiosity was childish. I knew the signs. I'm not stupid, I'm not naive, and I'm definitely not new to deception. But I'm also not confrontational about personal things, which sounds ridiculous for someone who spent decades walking into other people's chaos and telling them to breathe. Work was easy. Work had rules. Work had procedure. Home? Home was where you wanted to believe the person beside you wouldn't hurt you on purpose. So I waited. I told myself, we'll talk when he's ready. I told myself, don't accuse, don't assume, don't turn your house into a courtroom. Tonight he was ready, just not in the way I expected. He came home at 10 p.m. on the dot, which would have been almost funny if my stomach hadn't already been tense all evening. I was in the living room, alone, watching the news with the volume low. The lamp beside the couch threw warm light across the coffee table. Everything looked normal. So normal it felt like a setup. The front door opened. I heard his keys hit the bowl in the hallway. Then his footsteps. He walked in and saw me, and his face did something I can only describe as forgetting. Like he'd walked into a room expecting it to be empty. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "How was dinner?" Gavin's eyes skimmed over me like I was furniture. Fine. Cold. Distant. Not even trying. He didn't take his jacket off, didn't loosen his tie. He just stood there for a second, shoulders squared like he was about to announce something at a podium. "We need to talk," he said. I muted the TV. My thumb moved slowly, deliberately. One of my old habits. Never rush, never escalate first. "Okay." He exhaled sharply, like my calm annoyed him. This isn't working anymore. My heartbeat didn't spike. Not yet. That was the strange part. Some part of me had been bracing for it. "Gavin," I said carefully, "you've been out every night this week. You barely talk to me. Something is wrong." His mouth twisted. "Maybe you're what's wrong." That one landed. Not because it was clever, but because it was cruel in the way only someone close to you can be. I held his gaze. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I'm done," he snapped. "I want a divorce." There it was. The headline. The thing he'd been rehearsing in his car. The thing he thought would make him feel powerful the moment he said it out loud. I nodded once. "All right, we can talk about that. Maybe we should—" "I don't want to talk." His voice rose. "I want you to leave." I blinked. "Me leave? This is my house." He said it with a confidence that was almost impressive, like repetition could make it true. "And I want you out. Now." For a second, I genuinely wondered if I'd misheard him. "Gavin," I said, still seated, still calm. "It's both our house." He stepped closer. "No, it's my house." I felt something cold slide down my spine. We bought the house 20 years ago. We signed paperwork together. We paid the mortgage together. I could still remember the day we moved in. my youngest daughter running down the hallway, shrieking because she finally had her own room. "I'm not leaving at 10 p.m. because you're upset," I said. "If you want space, you can stay with your sister tonight. We'll talk tomorrow when everyone's calmer." That was when he smiled. Not a warm smile, not even a smug smile. A smile like a switch flipping. "Fine," he said. "If you won't leave, I'll make you leave." He pulled out his phone. And I just watched him. Curious in the same way I used to be curious during interviews when someone decided to lie and you wanted to see how far they'd go. He dialed 911. The call connected. His voice changed instantly. Higher, shaky, practiced. "Yes," he said, loud enough for me to hear clearly. "There's someone in my house who won't leave. I've asked her to go and she's refusing. I feel threatened." I stared at him, my blood turning hot and slow. Someone. In my house. The dispatcher asked for the address. He gave it. The dispatcher asked if the person was armed. Gavin hesitated, just a heartbeat too long, then said, "I don't know." He made me sound like a stranger, like a danger, like an intruder. I stood up then, quietly, and walked to the kitchen. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. Muscle memory took over. I opened a drawer and pulled out my retired police ID, still current. I grabbed my concealed carry permit, also current. I wasn't trying to flex. I was trying to survive what I knew was coming. If officers walked into a domestic call thinking there was an armed intruder, the margin for misunderstanding got razor thin. I returned to the living room and sat down again, placing the ID and permit on the coffee table where they'd be visible. Gavin kept talking to dispatch, pacing now, voice wobbling with fake fear. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Gavin moved fast, too fast, like he couldn't wait for the stage to fill. He flung the door open and his voice escalated immediately. "He won't leave. She won't leave. She's refusing and I don't feel safe." Then I heard a second voice. Male, younger, calm, professional. "Sir," the officer said, "take a breath. We're here. Can you tell me who's inside?" Gavin didn't answer right away and I could almost see him calculating. My wife," he said finally, like the word tasted wrong. "But I want her out. I don't want her here." The officer's tone stayed level. "Is this your wife's residence as well?" "It doesn't matter," Gavin snapped. "I want her gone." I rose and walked toward the doorway. And when I stepped into the light spilling from the porch, I saw the sergeant's face. He was taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, but the eyes were the same, sharp, steady, the kind that missed nothing. Sergeant Micah Vance. He used to be Officer Vance, a rookie I'd signed off on back when I was chief. I'd promoted him myself. Good kid, good cop. The kind you actually trusted to do the right thing when nobody was watching. His eyes widened for half a second. Then he went professional. "Ma'am," he said, voice careful now. "Can you step forward for me?" I did. He looked at Gavin again. "Sir, you said there's someone in your house who won't leave. You feel threatened. This is your wife?" "Yes," Gavin said, defensive. "But she refuses to go." Micah's gaze returned to me. And for the first time that night, I saw something shift behind his calm. Recognition, yes, but also concern. Because he understood before Gavin did what this was. Not a marital argument, a weapon. And Gavin had just handed it to the wrong person. Micah didn't look at me like a friend first. He looked at me like a sergeant walking into a call where the wrong assumption could get someone hurt. That was one of the reasons I'd promoted him back then, because he understood what professionalism actually meant. The porch light washed everything in a pale yellow. Cold air slid in behind the open door, carrying the faint smell of wet pavement. Gavin stood half a step behind Micah's shoulder, angling himself like the victim in a photo op, wide-eyed, breathy, performing fear like it was a rehearsed monologue. Micah's partner, another officer, younger, quiet, shifted his weight and kept his hands close to his belt. Standard posture, standard caution. Micah's eyes flicked once to the coffee table behind me. My retired ID and concealed carry permit were still visible, laid out flat like a confession. "Ma'am," Micah said, voice steady, "do you have any weapons on you right now?" "I'm carrying," I answered without flinching. "Secured, holstered, I haven't touched it." His partner's head lifted slightly, not alarmed, just alert, like the world had turned one notch sharper. Micah nodded once. "Okay, thank you for telling me." He didn't say chief yet, not out loud, not in front of Gavin, not until he understood exactly what game was being played. "Where is it?" he asked. "Right hip," I said, and I kept my hands visible, palms open, the way you're trained to do when you're trying to keep everyone breathing. Micah turned slightly to his partner. "I'm going to secure it temporarily." "I understand," I said. He stepped forward slowly, announced every movement, and removed the firearm like it was glass. Careful, procedural, respectful. He cleared it, checked the chamber, and handed it to his partner, who placed it in a lockbox in the patrol car. Gavin watched this with something like satisfaction, like he'd expected the threat narrative to work, like he thought he'd just proven something. Micah returned, hands free, posture unchanged. "Okay," he said, "let's talk." Gavin didn't wait. "She's refusing to leave," he blurted. "I asked her repeatedly. She's trespassing. I want her out of my house." Micah didn't react to the word trespassing. He didn't get pulled into Gavin's vocabulary trap. Instead, he asked the question that always breaks a liar open. "Sir, is your wife's name on the deed?" Gavin's jaw tightened. He glanced at me, then looked back at Micah like he could bully the truth into changing shape. "Yes," he said. Micah nodded again, calm as a metronome. "Then she's not trespassing." Gavin's face reddened instantly. "But I want her out." "I understand you want her out," Micah said, still calm. "But you can't call 911 to remove someone from their legal residence because you're having a domestic dispute." Gavin's voice went sharper. "She's threatening me." Micah's gaze snapped to him. "How?" She refused to leave," Gavin said, as if repeating it made it heavier. "That's not a threat," Micah replied. The quiet officer beside him shifted slightly. Not impatient, just ready. Micah turned to me. "Ma'am, have you threatened him tonight? Physically? Verbally? Have you touched him?" I didn't even have to think. No, I was sitting on the couch watching the news. He came home, asked for a divorce, told me to leave my home, and when I said no, he called 911. Micah's eyes held mine for half a second longer than necessary. And in that half second, I saw something I hadn't expected. Pain. Not for me, he didn't pity me, not like that. Pain, like he'd just realized. The person I'd protected and served alongside for decades was now standing in the most humiliating kind of vulnerability. Because betrayal doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with paperwork. Gavin cut in, voice rising again. "She's a former police chief. You don't understand what she's capable of." That was the pivot. The smear neatly dropped into the conversation like a blade under a napkin. Micah didn't blink. "Sir, her former job does not make her automatically dangerous." "Yes, it does," Gavin snapped. "She's intimidating. She uses her background to control people. She's controlled me for years." I felt my stomach turn. 26 years. 2 daughters. A whole life. And now he was rewriting it in real time, painting himself as a long-suffering victim. Micah's voice stayed even. "Sir, did she threaten you tonight?" Gavin hesitated again. I knew that hesitation. I'd seen it in interviews, when someone is deciding whether to commit fully to the lie. She wouldn't leave," he said finally. Micah exhaled through his nose, slow. "That's not what I asked." Gavin's voice cracked with fake indignation. "I want to speak to your supervisor." Micah's expression didn't change. "I am the supervisor on scene." "No," Gavin insisted. "Your boss. Someone higher. Someone who doesn't have..." He glanced at me, then back at Micah, the implication hanging in the air like smoke. "Someone who doesn't have history." Micah turned his head slightly, finally letting the name exist. "Yes," he said, clear as a bell. "I know Danielle Kerrigan." Gavin's face twitched. Micah's tone remained professional, but the authority sharpened. She was my chief. She approved my promotions. She signed off on my training. Gavin's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw actual fear. Not because he thought I'd hurt him, because he realized his narrative was collapsing. Micah continued, "And that changes nothing about what I'm going to do tonight." Gavin's eyes widened. "So you admit you're biased?" Micah's voice dropped a fraction. "No. I'm telling you, you don't get to weaponize the system because you're angry." Gavin's breathing turned loud. Dramatic. Performative. He lifted his hands slightly like he was pleading with the universe. "This is unbelievable," he said. "I called you because I'm scared in my own home." Micah stepped a half step closer. "Sir, I need you to listen carefully. The language you used on your 911 call. Someone in my house who won't leave, I feel threatened. That is language associated with an intruder call." "I didn't say intruder," Gavin snapped. "You didn't have to," Micah replied. "You knew what it would trigger. You knew what kind of response would show up at your door." Gavin's eyes flicked to his sister's house key on the counter, then back at Micah, then to me again, like he was searching for an exit. Micah's partner stood silent, but his posture tightened slightly, like he felt the call shifting too. Micah asked, "Sir, did you knowingly make a false report to 911? Gavin's face went hard. I felt threatened. Micah's voice sharpened. "That's not what I asked." Gavin's hands curled into fists. "She's trained. She carries a gun. She She's intimidating. Micah didn't flinch. So do thousands of lawful citizens in this county. That does not mean she threatened you. Gavin's voice jumped. You're taking her side. Micah's eyes stayed level. No, I'm taking the law's side. Then Micah looked at me, just briefly, and his voice softened by the smallest degree. Ma'am, do you want to press charges for a false report? The question hit the room like a door slamming. Gavin froze, because until that moment, he still believed this was a power play he could walk away from. That the worst thing that would happen was a lecture. But I wasn't a rookie anymore, and I wasn't going to teach him that emergency services were a toy. I held Micah's gaze. Then I looked at Gavin, the man who had built a life with me, who had kissed my forehead at funerals, who had stood beside me at our daughter's graduations, and who had just tried to turn me into a criminal in my own home. Yes, I said quietly, I do. Gavin's mouth fell open. You can't... Micah turned back to him. Sir, I'm going to ask you one last time. Did you knowingly file a false police report? Gavin's eyes darted wildly, searching for the right words. She refused to leave. Micah nodded once, like something had settled into place. Turn around, he said. Put your hands behind your back. Gavin's voice exploded. What? This is insane. She's abusing her power. Micah's partner stepped in, calm but firm. Micah spoke the words I'd said to people 1,000 times. You're under arrest for filing a false police report. Gavin's face went red, then white, then red again. He twisted, tried to pull away. Micah didn't manhandle him. He didn't need to. He cuffed him with the same controlled efficiency he'd use on anyone else. Gavin started shouting over his shoulder, spit flying. You did this! You did this to me! You're ruining my life! I stood perfectly still, hands at my sides, as if I was watching a scene from someone else's marriage. Micah read him his rights. Gavin kept yelling anyway. Threats, lawsuits, vows of revenge. Every word digging him deeper. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on, one by one, curiosity blooming like flowers in the dark. And right there, on my front steps, I felt something break open inside me. Not rage, not triumph. Just the cold, brutal acceptance that the man I married was willing to burn the entire house down, as long as I went down with it. Micah glanced at me briefly before guiding Gavin toward the patrol car. His eyes said what his mouth couldn't. I'm sorry. The car door shut with a heavy finality. The red and blue lights strobed across my living room walls, turning my familiar home into something haunted. And then, just like that, it was quiet again. No screams, no sirens, just me, standing in my doorway, staring at the empty space where my husband had been. I didn't cry. Not yet. Because the part of me that had survived 32 years of other people's worst decisions knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The house didn't feel like mine after they left. That's the part no one warns you about. Not the sirens, not the cuffs, not even the neighbors pretending not to stare as patrol cars pull away from your driveway. It's the silence afterward, the way it presses in, unfamiliar and heavy, like a room you've walked into blindfolded. I locked the door. I stood there for a long moment with my hand still on the deadbolt, listening to nothing. No footsteps, no television, no voice in the other room pretending we were still a couple. Just me. I slept on the couch that night, not because I couldn't go into the bedroom, but because I didn't want to. The bed still smelled like him, like a life that had ended without asking permission. By morning, the messages started. At first, they were tentative, confused, almost polite. What happened last night? Gavin says you had him arrested. Is everything okay? Then the tone shifted. By noon, my phone was buzzing like an exposed wire. How could you do that to him? You humiliated him. You used your old connections. Don't pretend you didn't. I didn't answer. I knew better. The first rule of survival when someone starts rewriting reality is this: say nothing until you have documentation. By mid-afternoon, my eldest daughter called. Her name flashed on my screen, and for a split second, my chest tightened with relief. Then she spoke. Mom, she said, and her voice was careful, guarded, like she was approaching something dangerous. What did you do? I closed my eyes. I sat on the couch, I said quietly. Your father called 911 and told them there was someone in his house who wouldn't leave and that he felt threatened. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, quick and uneven. He says you scared him, she replied. He says you used your background to intimidate him. I swallowed. Did he tell you the part where I didn't raise my voice, or touch him, or even stand up until the officers arrived? Another pause, longer this time. He says the officer who arrested him used to work for you, she said, that you pressured him. I let out a slow breath. That officer did his job. Nothing more. I didn't ask for special treatment. I didn't even speak to him privately. She's saying, my daughter stopped herself. He's saying you could have just left. My hand tightened around the phone. Sweetheart, I said carefully, would you leave your own home at 10 o'clock at night because someone demanded it? Silence. Then quieter. I don't know. That hurt more than anger would have. I'm not asking you to take sides, I said. I'm asking you to look at facts. There's a police report, a 911 recording. Nothing happened in secret. She didn't answer right away. He's really upset, she said finally. He's saying this destroyed his life. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the audacity was breathtaking. I didn't destroy anything, I said. He made a choice, and now he's angry that it had consequences. She murmured something non-committal and said she needed time. When we hung up, I sat there staring at the wall for a long time, feeling something old and sharp settle into my bones. This wasn't just about Gavin anymore. It was about who got believed. The next call came from his sister. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Are you satisfied? She snapped the moment I answered. He didn't sleep all night. He's on medication now. He's humiliated. I didn't humiliate him, I said. He humiliated himself. You could have dropped it, she shot back. You could have told them it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is ordering the wrong coffee, I said evenly. Calling the police and lying is a crime. She scoffed. You're ruining him over one phone call. One phone call that could have gotten me arrested, I said. Or worse. She went quiet for a beat, then hissed. You're cold. That's always been your problem. I hung up. By day 3, the story had fully mutated. Now it wasn't just that I'd had him arrested. Now I was an abuser. A tyrant. A former police chief who had allegedly controlled her husband with fear and authority for decades. The whispers traveled fast. Through mutual friends, old neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly deciding they had opinions. Some reached out directly. Some just stopped calling. I watched my social circle shrink in real time, like a map being erased. I met my attorney that afternoon. She was sharp, mid-40s. No patience for nonsense. I laid everything out. The police report, the 911 recording, the texts Gavin had sent from his sister's house accusing me of destroying him, threatening to make me pay. She listened without interrupting. Then she leaned back in her chair. This is pretty straightforward, she said. He filed a false report. He got arrested for it. The rest is noise. What about the house? I asked. How's the title? Joint, she nodded. Marital property. It'll be split. But given his behavior, we can argue for exclusive use during proceedings. Do it, I said. She hesitated. One thing you should be prepared for. Perception. People are going to think you used your former position to get revenge. I didn't, I said flatly. I know, she replied, but truth and reputation don't always move at the same speed. She wasn't wrong. The restraining order came 2 days later. Emergency. Filed by Gavin. He claimed I was stalking him. That I was using law enforcement connections to harass him. That he feared for his safety. I read the petition twice, then a third time. It was fiction. Pure invention. I hadn't contacted him once since the arrest. Not a call, not a text, not a drive-by, nothing. The hearing was scheduled fast. In the courtroom, Gavin wouldn't look at me. The judge did. Ms. Kerrigan, he said, have you contacted your husband since the arrest? No, Your Honor. Any attempts to reach him? No. He turned to Gavin's attorney. Where is the evidence of stalking? The lawyer shifted. My client feels unsafe given her background in law enforcement. The judge's eyebrow lifted. Feeling unsafe is not evidence, he said. Does she have any proof that Ms. Kerrigan contacted her or appeared near her? Silence. The night of the arrest occurred in Ms. Kerrigan's own home, the judge continued. Pressing charges for a false report is not stalking. It is a legal right. He denied the order, firmly. He also warned Gavin about misusing the court system. As we exited, Gavin's sister cornered me in the parking lot. You've destroyed her, she hissed. She can't sleep. She's medicated. All because you wouldn't just leave. I looked at her, tired to my bones. I didn't refuse to leave, I said. I refused to abandon my own home because someone was angry. She spat something under her breath and stormed off. That night, I sat alone in the living room again, replaying the last week like surveillance footage. Every move, every word, because I knew something instinctively now. Gavin wasn't trying to move on. He was trying to win. And he wasn't done yet. The order granting me exclusive use of the house arrived on a Thursday morning. Plain paper, black ink, no emotion in it at all. Gavin had 48 hours to collect his personal belongings only. Nothing else. No furniture, no shared property, no sentimental reinterpretations of what belonged to whom. My attorney insisted on being present. So did his. which should have told me everything I needed to know. They arrived Saturday at 9 on the dot. A moving truck idled at the curb like a threat. Gavin stepped out first, tight-lipped, jaw clenched, wearing the expression of someone who believed he was being wronged by the universe itself. Behind him came his sister, then his mother, and finally his attorney. 4 against 1, or at least that's how they wanted it to feel. My lawyer stood beside me on the front porch, clipboard in hand, posture relaxed but alert. She greeted them politely, professionally, like this was just another transaction. "Ground rules are simple," she said. "Mr. Kerrigan is here to retrieve personal belongings, clothing, personal effects, items purchased prior to marriage or exclusively by him. Anything else stays until the divorce settlement." Gavin didn't answer. His mother did. "She picked that couch," she said, pointing through the open doorway. "It's hers." My lawyer didn't miss a beat. "It was purchased during the marriage. It's marital property." "You're being petty," his mother snapped. "No," my lawyer replied calmly. "We're being compliant with the court order." The move started tense but contained. Boxes filled with his clothes, his shoes, his books, his golf clubs. I stood back, arms crossed loosely, watching strangers move through my home like it was already a museum of something dead. Then Gavin turned down the hall, toward my office. I felt it before I saw it. That tightening in the chest you get when something valuable is about to be violated. "Gavin," I said sharply, "that room is not part of this." He didn't stop. He walked in like he owned it. My office had always been my sanctuary. Old case files neatly boxed, notebooks from my years as chief, commendations, training manuals, letters from officers I'd mentored. Not secrets, but mine. "What are you doing?" I asked. He didn't answer. He went straight to my desk, yanked open a drawer, and started flipping through papers. "Looking for evidence," he said. "Evidence of what?" "Of who you really are." There it was. The naked hostility. He pulled out a folder, old notes from a closed investigation years ago. Nothing classified, nothing hidden. He snapped photos with his phone. My lawyer moved fast. "Absolutely not," she said, stepping between him and the desk. "You have no right to photograph her personal documents." "These are public record," Gavin shot back. "They are her notes," my lawyer replied. "You're not in discovery. You're not entitled to anything in this room." "They could help my case," he said. "Your case for what?" she asked sharply. "You're not being investigated. She's not under review. This is harassment." I stepped forward. "Delete them." Gavin looked at me, eyes blazing. "You don't get to order me around anymore." "Delete them," I repeated. He smiled, thin, satisfied. "No." He shoved the phone into his pocket, grabbed his last box, and stormed out. They were gone 30 minutes later. The house felt hollow again, but this time it felt contaminated. 2 days after that, I was served. Not with divorce papers. With a civil lawsuit. Gavin was suing me for emotional distress and abuse of power. $250,000. The claim alleged that I had orchestrated his arrest using my former position, that the responding sergeant was biased, that I'd humiliated him intentionally. My lawyer read it once. Then she laughed. Not amused, disbelieving. "This is nonsense," she said, "but nonsense can still be expensive." And that's when I understood the real strategy. He couldn't win on facts, so he'd drown me in process. Depositions followed. First, the sergeant. He testified clearly, calmly, without embellishment. He responded to a call, found no crime by me, and arrested Gavin for filing a false report. Standard procedure. They deposed 3 other officers who had been on duty that night. Same story. They tried to subpoena my former deputy chief. He declined. Retired. No obligation. The lawsuit stalled, bleeding time and money. Meanwhile, the criminal case moved forward. The trial took 1 day. The prosecution played the 911 call. Gavin's voice echoed through the courtroom. Angry, insistent, calculated. "My husband won't leave," he'd said. "Not I'm afraid. Not he threatened me. Just make her go." The defense argued he felt threatened because of my law enforcement background. The prosecutor asked one simple question. "Can you show us a single report, complaint, or documented incident of aggression by Ms. Kerrigan during the marriage?" Silence. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Verdict, guilty. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Sentencing was set for the following month. Probation, community service, a fine. No jail time, but a record. After the verdict, his sister called. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You've destroyed her." I closed my eyes. "A false police report isn't a phone call," I said. "It's a crime." She hung up on me. That night, alone in my house again, I sat at my desk, the same desk he'd rummaged through, and finally let myself cry. Not for the marriage. for the person I'd believed he was. Because the most dangerous thing about Gavin wasn't that he lied. It was that he believed the lie entitled him to ruin me. And I knew, deep down, he still wasn't finished. By the time sentencing rolled around, I had a new calendar. Not the kind with birthdays and holidays. The kind with court dates, filing deadlines, depositions, and invoices. The judge sentenced Gavin to 12 months of probation, 100 hours of community service, and a $1,500 fine plus court costs. He lectured him plainly. No legal poetry, no softness. You called emergency services with a false claim, the judge said. That ties up resources and endangers real victims. And in this case, you attempted to weaponize the system against your spouse. That is unacceptable. Gavin cried, apologized, said he made a mistake. The judge didn't engage. Mistakes are accidents. This had been a choice. The civil lawsuit limped on for another month, long enough to cost me $8,700 in legal fees, defending against something that never should have existed. Depositions went nowhere. Motions were filed. The judge dismissed the suit for lack of standing. Gavin's attorney tried to appeal. Denied. Case closed. The divorce, however, moved forward with all the grace of a slow landslide. House sold. After mortgage payoff and closing costs, we netted $340,000. Split evenly. Pension divided. He received 40% of what I earned during the marriage. Spousal support ordered at $1,800 a month for 5 years. No more after that. It was fair, it was legal, it was over. Except it wasn't. Because Gavin started a whisper campaign. He told people I'd been abusive, that I'd controlled him with my position, that I'd protected bad cops when I was chief, that his arrest was proof of my corruption. Some believed him, most didn't. I learned who my friends were by who asked questions, and who just vanished. The hardest part wasn't the money or the reputation. It was my daughters. They stopped calling, stopped texting. Holidays came and went like blank spaces on the calendar. I sent emails I didn't know if they read. I left voicemails that echoed back unanswered. Then, 2 weeks after sentencing, my eldest called. "Mom," she said softly, "I listened to the 911 call." I didn't interrupt. I read the court documents, the police report. I don't know what to do with all of it. "You don't have to do anything," I said. "You just have to think." "She sounds angry," she said, "not scared." She was angry, I replied. She wanted me out of the house. A long silence stretched between us. "I don't think you were abusive," she said finally. I think she made a really bad decision." Relief didn't come in waves. It came like a bruise loosening, slow, tender, cautious. "I'm not ready to have you back in my life yet," she added, "but I wanted you to know I'm thinking about it." "Take all the time you need," I said. "I'm here." She hasn't called since, but it was something. I moved into a smaller condo, a 2-bedroom in a quiet area, used part of the house money for the down payment. No history in the walls, no echoes, just clean lines and peace. Former colleagues reached out. The sergeant who arrested Gavin got promoted to lieutenant. He did his job right. I was proud of him. Someone asked me if it was worth it. The money, the fallout, the strain with my kids. I didn't hesitate. Yes, because the alternative was teaching someone that lying to the police works if you cry hard enough. I spent 32 years telling people actions have consequences. I just never thought I'd have to teach that lesson at home. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday. No ceremony, no dramatic last words, just signatures sliding across polished wood and the sound of a clock ticking somewhere behind the walls. When the judge stamped the papers, it felt anticlimactic, like the end of a storm you'd already survived weeks ago. 26 years reduced to a file number. I walked out of the courthouse alone. Gavin didn't look at me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not defeated, just hollow, like someone who had gambled everything on a story and lost control of the ending. The fallout lingered anyway. Mutual friends chose sides quietly. Some stopped inviting me places. Others reached out, awkward and apologetic, unsure what was safe to say. A few former colleagues called late at night, voices low, asking if any of the rumors were true. I told them the same thing every time. Listen to the 911 call, read the court record, then decide. Most did. A few didn't. That was fine. I learned something in retirement that 32 years on the force never fully taught me. You don't get to control what people believe, only what you can prove. Gavin moved in with his sister. I heard through the same grapevine that once spread lies that he was working part-time retail now. His professional reputation had taken a hit. Criminal records tend to do that. He complained to anyone who would listen that his life had been ruined. I never corrected them, because I didn't ruin his life. I refused to let him ruin mine. The condo settled into routine quickly. Mornings were quiet. Coffee tasted better without tension in the air. I read more, watched baseball without commentary from the other end of the couch, slept through the night for the first time in years. Peace, it turns out, isn't loud. It's boring in the best possible way. The younger daughter still hasn't called. I don't know if she ever will. That's the part no court can fix, no verdict can undo. You don't get restitution for broken trust with your own children. My lawyer says time helps, sometimes. I hope she's right. One evening, a few months after everything ended, I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights come on one by one. The air was cool. The world felt stable. Someone had asked me recently if I regretted pressing charges. I didn't have to think. No, not for a second. Because what Gavin did wasn't just personal betrayal. It was something bigger. People who file false reports don't just hurt the person they're targeting. They poison the system for real victims who need help. I spent decades telling people that laws exist for a reason, that systems only work if they aren't abused, that consequences matter. Turns out I had to live that lesson too. Do I regret the marriage? Parts of it. We had good years, raised 2 daughters, built something real once. But somewhere along the way, the man I married became someone who thought a lie was an acceptable shortcut to power. I've seen worse in interrogation rooms. I just never expected it in my living room. Dating? Maybe someday. Not now. Right now, I like the quiet. I like knowing that no one can call 911 and rewrite my existence with a sentence. I like living a life where truth is enough. Final lesson. If someone ever tries to weaponize the system against you, don't back down. Document everything. Get lawyers. Stand your ground. Because if they learn it works, they'll do it again. I didn't use connections. I didn't abuse power. I used my rights. And justice, even when it's expensive, lonely, and painful, is still justice.